And let me just speak to this gentleman because I was unemployed for a year and a half here in Jackson. There is a St. Luke's clinic here that takes people in just like you, absolutely free. They've treated me for bronchitis and pneumonia. They will give you the antibiotics that you need, that you will see a doctor every time. And there is help here in Jackson for uninsured.
Well, thanks, Ron, for getting through the answer without trip up. Hey, good to see you again. You're going to be part of this town hall series. 3 events already.
Well, so far.
Good.
Before I begin my 2 minutes, I do want to compliment you. Just the fact that you take all comers. I appreciate it. And it takes a little bit of, it's brave, and it's also you're taking a beating, and I'm about ready to give you one. Okay.
Well, this isn't a beating. We're amongst neighbors, and I certainly applaud you for what you've done for your brother.
I'm getting there. My name is Rick Keith, and I'm from Grass Lake. A few things that you said today, and a few things that other people have commented on. First of all, people who mentioned God. Gospel of Matthew talks about, Jesus says, comfort the sick and comfort the poor. And everybody will go through, and then Jesus also, if Jesus is your God, and you believe him to be your God, but you don't actually do what he says. Jesus had another word for that, and that was hypocrite. Secondly is tax cuts to bring business to Michigan don't necessarily bring more jobs to America. If we have a tax cut here, but we rob and a business leaves Wisconsin to come here, what that does is creates blight in 2 different places. This isn't a question. These are just a few comments. And I saw you in Hillsdale. A couple things said there. I think people are trying to scare people into choosing one side or another. You had a guy there who talked about the radio frequency identification tags, and he was talking about how your healthcare, your whole health records and your credit cards are all going to be on that chip, when in fact all that's on that chip is a number, which is associated with a file, which is in a database somewhere. So if somebody reads that number, they can't get all that information. And you had the guy, Jeff Horton, I believe, spreading that kind of fear. That's ridiculous. I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican. I'm just against anybody who makes crap up. And I'm not going to stand for made up crap. So, please, you and I can have this conversation somewhere else. Oh, please.
Hey, Scott.
Anyway.
Scott, come on.
Anyway, the last thing I want to say is, you mentioned in Hillsdale and here that Medicare is broke. Well, one of the reasons Medicare is broke is people are not properly informed. My mother died at 63, and nobody told her that her stroke and her condition, everybody would try to be optimistic about it, but instead she lived for 6 more months, and she spent 4 months of that at University of Michigan Hospital. Her health care bill for the last 6 months of her life was in excess of $650,000. My father, who was on Medicare, he lived for another 1.5 years beyond my mother. He didn't want to live. He had a dialysis patient. I don't want to live. He breaks his hip, has a surgery, has another surgery. I don't want to live. I don't want to live. Finally, I said, Dad, why are you continuing to take this, taking dialysis? And he said, because I don't want to disappoint the doctors. Took him the next day to talk to the doctor, and 2 weeks later, he made arrangements to. We had one more Christmas with him. Then he stopped. And then he stopped treatment, and then he died 3 days later. But his last 6 months, not even the whole 1.5 years, but his last 6 months on Medicare was $450,000. If somebody had just gotten him to him and said, hey, stop doing this. I was just 2 weeks ago, I was a pallbearer for a 94-year-old woman who decided I'm going to take chemotherapy so I can live another year. Instead, without chemotherapy, I could live 6 months. Well, her out-of-pocket expenses during that 6 months, she ended up 1 month of nausea, then anemic, and then hair loss and puking. And then she died in 7 months. So her 6 months wasn't good, and her out-of-pocket expense was $25,000. And now my uncle, he's 74 years old, sucked on Camel no filters for...
Let's get to the punchline here, because we got a whole group.
The punchline is while you're sitting there pulling out clumps of your hair and puking your brains out, Thanks Sarah Palin for all that death panel baloney, because that's made up crap.
Okay, next.